Hello and welcome to the IdeaCast interview series, episode number 75. My guest in this episode is Erin Riley, and she is the author of a book entitled A Dark Force, 20 Years with a Covert Narcissist. And as you might guess, we're going to talk about narcissism, family, relationships, and we're also going to discover Erin's biography, if you will, her story, her life story. And it's, to me, it's fascinating. As someone who was a child of the 70s, she had spent about 40 years in the music and entertainment business and met a lot of people in the rock and roll genre of contemporary arts of that period. So it's an interesting conversation. We try to keep it humorous, but it does deal with a very dark topic of narcissistic abuse and codependency. So buckle up for that one. I really enjoyed this conversation. Erin was a wonderful guest, and I hope there's a good takeaway for you in this conversation. Thank you. And I'd like to welcome Erin Riley to the IdeaCast interview series. We are going to be discussing some matters that I'll put a minor caveat onto this conversation for those of you in the audience. It deals with narcissism, dysfunctionality, and things like that. So be prepared, and we're gonna dig in and talk about some really some interesting and tough things, but a lot of fun and cool stuff too. And so, Erin, I'll welcome you in, and we're going to talk about your book. And I just can't wait to get started on it. So, could you give us the title of your book and introduce yourself and welcome?
All right, I'll even hold it up. I have it here with me.
Yes, please.
All right. So the title of the book is called A Dark Force, 20 Years with a Covert Narcissist. It's a memoir. So it's a story of my life. I was born in 1959, so I'm 64 years old this year. And I really had to take a deep dive into my own personal experience to come to the understanding of how something like this happened to me. How did I marry and stay with a narcissistic person for 20 years? So that's what the book is about. And I'm really happy to say it's doing really well, and people are responding really positively to it. And it has a really good, happy ending. So, just to tell everybody, narcissists do cause a lot of damage in their wake, but recovery is possible, and to live an even better life after is more than possible.
Thank you for doing a good job, better job than me in setting up your book and explaining what it's about. And so I will then reciprocate and say that I confess to my guests when I don't read the book all the way through. I'll say, oh, I'm down to the last 2 chapters, and I'll do it in front of the audience as a confession. But I did read your book in its entirety. And so to the YouTube audience, I will say this is a page turner. This is a fast read for somebody who wants to take a wild ride. And by wild ride, Erin will tell us that this book covers a lot of territory and a lot of social territory and cultural territory. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll is embedded in this book. And Erin, for you, I wore my last rock and roll t-shirt from
Yes.
Do you know Nile by any chance?
I do know Nile.
Nile. George Collius is my favorite drummer. I do love extreme death metal, but I love everything. I love all music. But anyway, this is the last show I went to in December of 2019. And I thought, what better to wear for Erin Riley than my last rock shirt? And to go closure, my wife and I are going to go see Skinny Puppy on Monday. So it's their last tour. Oh gosh, I saw them 30 something years ago. And so it's like a trip back. So rock and roll to the YouTube audience. It's going to be in there. And so, but we're not glorifying anything necessarily when we talk about the drugs part. It's just part of the reality of this situation. And I am guilty of self-medicating and taking care of my narcissistic abuse with that kind of thing. My dad once told me that victims of abuse either blame themselves or they blame the world. So I went the myself route. So anyway, but yes, to get more serious for a moment, let's see. I guess let's do the classic chronological move where we look at your childhood, because that's where things started. And I mentioned before we hit record that I would share a quote with both you and the audience, and you're very obviously familiar with this quote, but I do want to share this with the audience. So this is reading from her book. When you have no tools in your toolbox, you are doomed to repeat your mistakes over and over again until you learn the hard way how to become your own best friend and prioritize yourself. I thought I was being a good person through self-sacrifice. And so, Erin, that struck me as being a kind of good, and all ha-has aside about the rock and roll lifestyle, that was a good way to contextualize this book. So let's start with where you're coming from in your upbringing, your development, and what relates to that quote, from your childhood.
Sure, I would be happy to. So I'm going to start at the end very quickly and
Sure.
then go back to the beginning, because I think that will help it give a little context to the listeners, to your viewers.
Okay.
So I was married, my second marriage, 20 years, to a gentleman, and the relationship was just fraught with difficulty from, I guess, after the first couple of years. And it was just really hard to kind of unpack what was going on. I couldn't feel close to him. He was secretive, seemed kind of arrogant, whatnot. In the end, when I did kind of get hip to his behavior was intentional, and he was aware that I was aware, he really pretty much did the big discard, gathered everything, stole all the money, all the property, moved to Panama, which was where we we're going to retire together. And that all said, I'm left here going, what happened? I'm 20 years married to this guy. He tells me he loves me. I'm the love of his life. The relationship, like I said, is good and bad, but it's not, he doesn't hit me. He's not an alcoholic. He has a good job. He's smart. He's helpful. All these things. Can't figure it out. So that's how it ended up being a memoir, because I really had to look at my own life and all my personal experiences, especially my childhood, to understand what my role was in it and how I could learn to protect myself, because I'm still me and I'm still carrying the me inside me everywhere I go, in all of my experiences. So if I'm vulnerable to these predatory people, I want to know why and how and what I can do about it so it never happens to me again. So that's why I wrote this book, is so that I can hopefully save people from spending 20 years in a terrible relationship and then having everything stolen from them before they start to do the work that I had to do after the fact. I'm 64 years old, so I'm growing up very late in life. Obviously, I thought I had it. So yes, I thought that being self-sacrificing and being giving was a good way to be. I thought that's how I would want other people to be toward me. I live under that golden rule of, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And I would want someone to help me or give me a surprise gift or a compliment or whatever. So why wouldn't I do that for another person? That just seems like I just want to be part of the nice people group. I'm a good person. I like other people. So where did I learn this from? All right. So I was raised in Manhattan in the 1960s by two parents that were working sort of peripherally in the entertainment business. My mother was a fashion model, and a big one. Like, she was this, oh my God, haute couture, big designers, $10,000 dresses, wigs, $2,000 shoes, false eyelashes, just looked like a, sorry. She looked like a freak. She didn't look like a mother, my mother, She looked like, and I hate to say this because she was better than that, but Joan Crawford. So we all know the story of Mommy Dearest and Christina Crawford's story of her mother. That's how my mom felt to me as a little girl. My mom felt like something untouchable, unattainable, unreachable, not connected to me, not warm, not loving, not nurturing. She didn't see me. She didn't hear me. If I tried to talk to her, she'd go like, she's busy with her adult stuff. Well, where I'm a little different than most people with a degree of codependency, and that's what that phrase speaks to. That phrase basically sums up, it's like a definition for codependent behavior. I did not take it the same way most other people did. Most other people take it as what you were saying. Something must be wrong with me. If my own mom isn't loving toward me, I must not be lovable. And that's this, terrible burden that people carry around through their entire lives, that there must be something flawed about them, and so then they maybe have to accept this poor behavior, or they can't get another relationship, or they can't take care of themselves on their own. And that was not my case. I'm a little different, and I hope there's somebody out there listening that can relate to this. I felt as though my mother was the oddball. She seemed really different than the other mothers. And so I must be okay. She's the problem. I had girlfriends and guy friends too when I was a little girl. And so I thought, well, kids seem to like me. So here's what I figured out from all that. What I figured out is that, and all the things that we were told back then in the 60s, the adults were in charge and the kids were kind of property. You know, we do what we're told. We clean our plates, we go to our room, we shut up, you know, and nobody cares what you have to say, you know, and they're just, you know, they're half kidding. But I think it created a lot of damage to a lot of people. I feel as though hearing phrases like that and being treated like that caused me to accept this as normal, right? So the stonewalling and not being acknowledged, listened to, considered, treated equally, I guess I just carried that with me. And as an adult, what I would say is, oh, fine, you're not going to answer me? It's your problem. I'm not going to let that bother me. But the truth of the matter is it's wrong. And it does bother me, you know? And so what I'm now doing is I'm having a disconnect in my brain and in my heart and soul. And that's a survival method, you know, how you can survive. Because if you really have to acknowledge that perhaps you are, you know, somehow flawed, or you have shame, or you have any of these issues, you know, that people have when they come out of dysfunctional childhoods, which more than 50% of us do. So it's a lot of us trying to unpack this stuff. It's just, it's very, very difficult. So that's why I wrote the book that way, is, you know, I got so used to being stonewalled by my mom that I accepted that behavior from narcissists. And so anyway, that time is gone. That is done. I am done with that now. So so yeah. And then we can move on if you want to talk about, you know, then my career. I also had a career where I worked with a lot of narcissistic people as well. So
yeah.
So do you want me to speak about the career next, or?
Yes, I do. And I just,
Go next.
I want to touch back on one thing you said, and this might be something the audience can take away too, is that the golden rule is contingent, you know? And so, and I've said this to my wife before, it's like, yeah, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But there's a lot of sick people in the world, and there's a lot of sadomasochistic people in the world. So, you know, some people are going to do foul. And so that was whoever coined the golden rule was taking a lot of things for granted, I think. Yeah. And so yeah. I just wanted to clarify, for me, I'm so cynical when it comes to that kind of thing. It's like, well, yes, when it's appropriate, when there is respect, trust, yada, 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 that the golden rule is perfect. But there's so much that can break down to where it's asymmetrical, and one person is living by the other golden rule and the other person's a predator. Then we get books like yours that teach hard lessons.
Absolutely. Justin, I just didn't know there were people out there that thought like that. So let me just speak to what you're saying here. Most people, you know, kind people who are empathetic, who do live by the golden rule, at least their understanding of it, they say, well, I wouldn't want you to hurt me, so I'm not going to hurt you. Well, people who lack empathy for whatever reason, either early caregiver, neglect, or something in birth or in utero, who knows where it starts. You know, there's still some research being done about, you know, where does narcissism come from? But those people have a different mindset, and they don't think like that. They think kill or be killed.
Yeah.
Right. And they think like that. And they think you think like that too. They think everybody thinks like that. Just like you and I think that everybody thinks we're all doing our best and we want to be empathetic toward each other and we want to be understanding and give space to others. Well, people that don't have empathy are thinking, I better get over on this person first before they get me, because it's a chess game.
Yeah.
And they think you're doing the same. So really, in some ways, it's just about education, that those people do exist that think differently than you. And it is, it's naive for people to think that people have your best interests in mind.
Right.
You know, always, what do they say? Trust but verify.
Yeah, we heard that a lot during the Iraq War and so forth. But yeah, it's true. And checking in with the audience, I'd like to tell you all, we're just starting to dig into things here. And so Erin and I had a nice chat before we hit record, and one thing I'd like to deliver to the audience, and by way of Erin's book, is that if you are young and you come into this conversation or find Erin's book, there is sage in there. And if you are midstream, if you are in a relationship with somebody, or you have a family member that there's stuff that doesn't feel right, this book is a good didactic. I like that word. It's a good teaching tool. And if you're maybe on the other side of it, as Erin is now, or you're coming out of it, this book has so much value in it that it can show you phases or stages of these kind of things. And so I wanted just to lay that down. And then now I'd like to, Erin, talk about one of the chapters where you break away, you get out of the East Coast. Your mom had to leave your father because this is another important aspect. I think there was alcoholism involved. It was low functioning alcoholism. And that can just mess a child up right there. That can lead to a lot of codependence there because of the alcoholic psychology there. So you had a double whammy of an unavailable mother, alcoholic father that wasn't necessarily available either, and very dysfunctional. I mean, towards the end of his life, it was just a shame what was going on. So you scat to LA. Take it from there, because this is this is the fun part of the book. Yeah. To me, it was just really exciting.
All right, we'll get into the fun part. Let me go back for just a second. So childhood in New York City and Manhattan, Upper West Side, in a Mad Men scene. My father promised my mother he could quit drinking if we could move out of the city. Right. It was too tempting. All his friends, his bar buddies, and a bar on every corner. So my mom had to give him that last chance. She's like, all right, let's move to the country. We're going to buy a farm and we're going to live in New Jersey on 8 acres of farmland with a barn and everything. And that was a big culture shock for me. But, in some ways it was an adventure, and there were things I really liked about being in nature and, waddling through streams and finding fish and turning over rocks. That was a fun thing, climbing trees and whatnot. But the more important thing that happened that really impacted me was that move took me away from all of my friends, right? So I have friends in New York and I have a very dysfunctional family, but my friends are my rock. That's the only thing that keeps me sane, is that I have a little, posse of friends. Well, moving out to New Jersey, lost all my friends. This is before people had, cell phones or social media to stay in touch with. Kids aren't writing letters.
Pen pals.
Everybody's like, go make some new friends. Well, guess what? Nobody wants to be friends with the new girl coming into 6th grade. It's like, you have 3 heads. So a couple things happened a lot of bad things happened to me. So people read about them in the book. I don't think we need to talk about them too much, but I gained almost 100 pounds. I mean, my father fell down a flight of stairs, became epileptic. My mother left us with my father. Really, a lot of family trauma just blew up at the end of my teen years. And so that's when I went to California. I'm like, how far can I get away from this place? I was in college at the time, just a state college. I wasn't even going to class. I was just like hanging out in the dorm room and smoking pot and trying to figure out, how can I hide away from the whole wide world? This room seems safe.
For now.
Right. I couldn't think of what to do. And finally, so I had no direction. I had no parents. I had no connection. I didn't go home on the holidays because there was no family any longer. So I decided I was going to go to California. I was just going to do that thing that everybody said. I'm going to go find myself in California because I must be there. That's where I
paradise.
am. It's paradise. So I did that. I moved to California when I was 19. I quit college. I started working at a little photo lab. I had a friend of a friend, got me a job as a billing clerk. And it was just a little hourly job. My rent was, I think, $235 a month in Los Angeles at the time, in Hollywood. So, I'm scraping my money together and I'm shopping at the dollar store. But you know what? Life is getting better every day. I'm away from my trauma. I can tell you that you can run away from your problems temporarily, enough to start to rebuild. Right. So, that's something I advise to people. If you've really done everything you possibly can to deal with the situation and you can't, it's best to exit the situation. You're still going to carry all the trauma along with you. So that's your job to process in the aftermath. But to at least stop the bleeding is important, right? Yeah. Very important.
Absolutely.
So I got to California, and then the craziest thing happened. So I'll tell the story from the book as efficiently as I can here. one of my coworkers, her brother's band was getting airplay on a local radio station. And she came over and said, would you call and request their song for me? Because they're kind of hip to my voice now. They know I call every day.
Yeah.
So I said, sure, no problem. That sounds like fun. I never called a radio station before. And I ended up talking to the DJ. And I didn't know the DJ would pick up. Like, I just didn't know how that all worked. And we had a wonderful conversation and we laughed a lot. And he said, I bring my photos to that lab that you work at. So next time I come in, I'll ask for you. Maybe I can say hi. And that he did. A week later, this guy came in and we met and he asked me to dinner and we started dating. Now, we're going to raise our hand to a little more of Erin's dysfunction. I was 19. He was 35 years old.
Yeah.
Right? So
Right.
I just have to confess that. There's my new daddy.
Right.
There's
Right.
new dad. So we replaced the alcoholic dad with a new dad who actually was very fatherly. I have to say, had lots of wisdom and knowledge and wanted to impart to me. And, he cared a lot. He was a little controlling, a little jealous, but made me feel like, I was the center of his universe. And I really appreciated that at the time. But, he had his problems, too old for me, cocaine problem, other issues.
Right. All the baggage. Yeah.
Believe me, I can find him. You want me to find you a dysfunctional partner? Call me. I got it. I can do that for you. I can pick him right
like
out.
a Saturday Night Live character or something.
Wouldn't that be funny?
They should do one.
So,
like that. Well, not these days, but maybe in the 80s. Yeah.
But in the 80s,
80s,
yes.
yeah.
So anyhow, what happened was I would go to work with him. We started dating. I would go to work with him while he was a radio DJ at night. I would work at the photo lab during the day, I'd go to the radio station at night. And one day I said to him, how hard is it to be a DJ? It just seemed like a fun environment. There's no bosses around at night, playing records, you're talking to people, it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
How hard is this? And he said, Erin, a trained monkey could do this.
Yeah. Just watch WKRP and you're all set. Yeah.
Right. And so I thought,
sorry.
no. That's everybody's idol in video. Are you kidding? Tony
Oh,
Fever?
sure. Yeah.
Tony Fever. So I started practicing in the production room and I took some classes and I went to volunteer at a different other radio station and just hang around. Back then, how to break into the biz was just hang around until somebody doesn't show up. And that happens. Somebody gets caught in a traffic jam and they're like,
Yeah.
Erin, can you go on the radio? And I'm like, sure.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what happened. It was midnight to 6 a.m., but I was allowed to be on the radio on K-Rock, on Los Angeles, in Pasadena, an up and coming big station that was the rock of the 80s, had a radio station format that blew up and went all over the country as a syndicated format. But here I am in Los Angeles. I'm about 19, 20 years old, and I'm talking on the radio, and I'm working at a radio station where all the hippest, coolest people are coming in and out. We've got Rodney Bingenheimer, who is one of our evening DJs on the weekend. If you would look on, I think it's HBO, but it's one of those pay-per-view subscribed channels. There's a documentary about him called The Mayor of Hollywood Boulevard, or The Mayor of Los Angeles. Anyway, Rodney Bingenheimer. I would walk into his studio. It could be anybody. It could be Debbie Harry could be there. It could be Chrissy Hine could be there. It could be Annette Funicello could be there. It could be Ricky Nelson and his children. It could be, Johnny Rotten. Like any day I would walk in to do my little shift in the middle of the night and there'd be some kind of crazy rock star hanging out with Rodney. And we had all kinds of cool rock stars coming in and out. And I thought I was just enamored of the whole scene. So I just set my mind on radio as a career. I didn't have a college degree. I didn't have any, connections. I just refused to leave. Like, I'm not leaving. So because I think I had something to prove, and I don't know who I was trying to prove it to, maybe myself. I'll be really honest. I think really only myself. But I had to prove myself worthy, capable, motivated.
Seen.
I really wanted seen. Yeah, there you go. Seen, heard, acknowledged, with something to contribute. I wanted to be seen as somebody that, had something to say, because nobody wanted to listen to what I had to say as a kid, or as we were joking before the interview, my brother and I joking, Nobody
Yeah.
cares what you have to say, right?
That's right.
So wouldn't it make perfect sense that I would take that and go into being a radio DJ, right?
Right. Oh, it's so
Yeah.
fitting.
Right? Nobody cares what you have to say. Everybody cares what I have to say.
That's right. Nobody needs to know the irony behind. Oh my
So
gosh.
that said, I worked in Los Angeles for a couple of years at that wonderful radio station K-Rock and had so many wonderful experiences. Some of them are in the book. Then I went to Santa Barbara in California, which was a beautiful place. And I got to interview so many people, Nick Lowe, Elvis Costello, Brian Ferry of Roxy Music, Sting. I mean, it could go on. Cyndi Lauper. I want to say also, who was it? The Bangles, before they even had a record deal, when they were just like little girls.
Yeah, a bar band or something. Yeah.
No makeup, no nothing.
Cool.
So anyway, a lot of really fun experiences, and I really started to do very well in radio. I really enjoyed it. I felt like I hit my groove there, and I love talking, as you can tell. I love music, and I love the rock stars. All throughout my teen years, when I had no friends in New Jersey, the rock stars were my friends. I just sat there with the headphones on all day and night, just like absorbing the music of the 70s. Boy, what a lucky time that was for music.
Oh,
no,
you were the right age at the right time. I mean, I'm 10 years younger, but I was a child of the 70s and a stoner rockhead of the 80s, so
right.
Starting in the late 70s. In fact, I got a cute little radio story for you. I grew up in Washington, D.C., and so WWDC was the big station. That was the K-Rock of that area, and Wave 104.7, I think, but 101.1, which is where Howard Stern got his start.
Yeah, DC 101.
DC 101, they were the big rock station. And what was cute is anyway, they were just rock. And so what was cute is they had an AM sister channel, and it was WWDC 760 AM. And I listened to that channel when I wasn't listening to other stuff. And I must have been the only person in Washington, D.C. that listened to this channel, because they always had giveaways. I could be the fifth caller and, all this kind of stuff. So I'm 9 years old. I won everything. And nobody else. Every time I called, I won. And I won theater tickets. Roller boogie with who was the girl from The Exorcist?
Linda Blair.
Linda Blair was in Roller
Linda
Boogie.
Blair.
That was such a 70s movie. And I saw Bill Cosby at Constitution Hall. I won free tickets for that. So my poor mother had to drive downtown all the time to go, schlep me down there to pick up all these things that I won: theater tickets, shirts, whatever. But I can think now as an adult, like the poor DJ, he grabs that fifth caller and it's this little squeaky 9-year-old. Hey, it's me again. So, anyway, I thought you might appreciate that. As somebody who was a DJ, he was probably just face palming. Oh Christ, there's got to be something better in my life. When am I going to make it to the FMs? So anyway,
that's a great story. That is a great story.
It was so rich because I got to see good. I never went to rock concerts because it was all very squeaky clean. No, I went to see Dr. Hook, but I think my mother paid for that one. But anyway, so you were in LA for a while, and then I think you in your book mentioned that Santa Barbara, and then you migrate back east, and there's a whole treasure trove of incredible stories of your success. I would say you just, I mean, there are some spots that maybe we can touch on, but when you migrated back east, more of the same as far as I can tell. I mean, in certain periods that you carried your success with you and you grew, I think, if I'm doing justice to that. Maybe I'll stop now and let you talk about your years in Philadelphia and Tom and some of the things that were going on there. That was all, and your story about Tom and Keith Richards. It wasn't the Bahamas. Was it in one of the Virgin Islands or something? Antigua. Oh my God. The frozen Danish. For you guys in the YouTube audience, this is all in the book. We don't give too much away.
Right. I don't want to tell that story. It's too good.
No,
it's like,
there's some rock star.
Too funny a story.
Keith Richards, frozen Danish, tiny car. I'll leave it at that.
Right, don't forget. Explosion
too.
Gas explosion.
And your hair looks great.
Thank you. Look, it came back. All right, so people are like shaking their heads, they're tuning out now.
These two have just, we've lost the audience, and I'm sorry. So let's reel ourselves back in here.
All right, let's go back to how did I get to Philadelphia? So like I said, I became very motivated. I think I had something to prove to myself. And this chosen career of mine, radio, I was just going to move to the very top of it. I just really loved it. And what's not to love, hanging out with rock stars and talking to people about music and listening to and playing music. So that said, I went down to the Billboard convention that one year. I was in Santa Barbara 2 years. I went down to the Billboard convention that was back in LA in Pasadena, and I saw some of my old coworkers from K-Rock. I asked them to introduce me to some people so I could maybe see if I could get an even better job than the job I had. I was just looking to meet people and continue my networking and grow, all the people that I knew. And I overheard one of my co-DJs, sort of like my mentor, this girl, her name is Dusty Street. She was on KSAN in San Francisco, then she was on K-Rock in Los Angeles. She's a legendary female DJ, one of the first ever, one of the first 3 or 4 in all of FM radio. She eventually became the voice of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. She was there for many, many, many years. So pretty well-known girl in radio, DJing. She was my idol. And she was talking to this one guy in Philadelphia. His name is Charlie Kendall, and said, oh no, I ain't moving to Philadelphia. You couldn't pay me enough. It snows there. And I hear this conversation and I tippy toe over. I'm like joining the conversation because I'm thinking I could go there. Like I'm cool with
Snow's
the
not
snow.
that bad. Yeah.
Snow's fine. I grew up with snow. It's all good. So after, I stood in this little conversation circle with these people, these 2 other people, Charlie went off to talk to somebody else. And I said, Dusty, tell them to hire me. Like, I would love that job. She looked at me and she said, they're out of your league, girlfriend. And I thought to myself, oh no, you don't tell me that. Like something, that little fire
It's
that's
on.
in me.
Yeah.
Yep, it's on. There's a fire in me. There may be a fire in everyone. Your fire can get dampened easily.
Yeah.
But there's a fire in my belly, and I was going to just show her. So I set about for the next 9 months doing everything I possibly could to get that guy's attention. I would send him postcards and, demo tapes and promotional things. I was doing anything I could, leave messages, hi, Erin called, thinking about you. Well, 9 months later, exactly, what always happened in the radio, somebody doesn't show up, somebody needs to get fired, somebody moves on. And I was the first person he thought of. It's like, I'm going to give that job to that girl that won't go away. She won't go away.
Yeah.
Called me up and he said, I want to offer you this job in Philadelphia. And Philadelphia is the 5th largest market. And Santa Barbara is the 129th largest market. So that was a no-brainer, right? So I quit my job, moved to Philadelphia to work for this fabulous radio station called WMMR, legendary rock station, one of the top stations in the entire country. And I get there for my, first day or whatever from my discussion with this guy. And he said, listen, I have some good news and I have some bad news. And I'm like, what do you mean bad news? Like, what do you mean bad news? I just quit my job. And he said, well, the DJ I was going to let go is, he's got a contract. I can't really, I can't really let him go. However, I have a job opening that I would love to offer you. It's called music director. And I was like, well, I'm only 23 years old and never been a music director. Like, that's kind of a big job in a big market like that. And he goes, you'll be fine. And that was it. That was a job of a lifetime. I wish I could gift that job to every person in the world because it was just a blast. I spent 10 years at this radio station, big rock station in Philadelphia. I chose all of the music that they played. I mean, I was the first line of defense. So the record companies and the managers and the artists who were reaching out to me would contact me with their new records, mostly the label people at the record labels. I would listen to everything that was released that week. And then I was the first line and I would make the decisions based on, what I felt was right for the radio station. And then I would recommend them and we would have a programming meeting with another 2 or 3 people. So it might be the program director, assistant program director, myself and my assistant would be in there listening to these songs that I had recommended together and deciding in what rotation we would add them to the radio station, if we would, in fact. So it might be that's a hit, that's going to be in heavy rotation. We're just getting started with this one. Maybe we'll play it in the overnight hours just to test it and see if people respond to it. But those decisions were made as a group, but you had to get by me first. So I'm the person that everybody is taking to dinner, getting tickets for, making sure I'm meeting the rock stars, standing on, sending limo, whatever. It was like being a princess.
Yeah.
It's like being a rock and roll princess, And I tell you, if I had any issues with self-esteem prior to that, and I did. They were fixed. They were fixed, or seemingly fixed by that. I felt like, here I am, people care about what I have to say about what's a good song. So once again, that being heard. I'm a DJ. I feel heard. I'm choosing music for a radio station, and people respect my choices. They think I have good ears, right? So once again, I feel as though I'm building value for myself, and my self-esteem is starting to come back. Now, I will tell you that even through this incredible decade of meeting every rock star under the sun, and I have a couple stories about Steven Tyler, who is my favorite, and I could tell you 100 Steven Tyler stories. You know, he's a blast. He's a blast. Steven Tyler, Cheap Trick are some of my favorites. I was able to meet Paul McCartney. I met David Bowie at least 10 times. Stories about everybody and fun experiences of traveling around. And going to concerts and you know, being on stage, and some funny like insider backstage kind of stuff that was fun as well too. But in reality, it was like a Band-Aid, you know, it was a Band-Aid that disguised what was really deep within me, which was, you know, that I didn't really have a connection to who I was inside. You know, I was sort of focused externally on my job and the rock stars and the attention and others, instead of understanding who I was and what was really right for me. I would just push that stuff away. If something didn't feel good, I would just push it away and use my brain. And I think that, you know, that came from growing up in New York City and being hypervigilant and operating in survival mode. So the person that, you know, I thought I was growing, I thought I was getting away from the trauma of my life, but I was obviously just distracting myself from what I really had to learn. So once I left that job when I was 31 years old, I started to learn those lessons the hard way, very hard, and through 2 very bad marriages. One was to an alcoholic who used a lot of narcissistic tricks, and the second one is who the book is about. So the book is everything, but the book is primarily to understand a covert narcissist, so that you can recognize them as they approach you. So you can run.
Yes. And don't look back. Don't look back. Not like the horror movies where they look back and then they trip. You run. Just go. This isn't a horror movie. You don't have to fall down. Every 80s slasher flick, they turn around and you're like, stop turning around, go. Anyway,
I know, I'm thinking of, I'm sorry, you just got me on, I'm going to go off on a tangent. I can picture little Robbie, what's her name? Robbie in Friday the 13th, running from the Jeep through the woods and stuff. Slashed against the tree.
It's just so
Poor
predictable.
Little Robbie.
So predictable. And in the 50s, they fell down so elegantly when the monster was, you know, they had their long dress on and and then the audience is like, oh dear, you know, it's a different kind of horror back then. In the 80s, they just cut everything out. They're like, no, we're going to turn you into hamburger. You know, that's all they're.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'm glad you picked your book up, because there was a dark force in the industry too. And this is in the book, and I won't give anything away, but so there is misogyny, there is control, there is pay for play and transactional relationships and that kind of thing. So this is a good segue, because we just had fun with the LA and the Philadelphia scene, but let's go into something a little darker. And for the audience, again, I can't implore you enough to be vigilant and listen to this conversation. There'll be resources available. I'll make sure, because you mentioned Dr. Ramadi in your book and in other interviews, and I can put a link down to her channel. Think of her what you will, but there's a good place to start, and then you can go from there. So there will be resources in the description field. On top of Erin's YouTube channel, you were talking about your mother earlier. You did a beautiful slideshow tribute to your mother, and so we can see Marilyn Kit Riley there. If you're interested, if you're being drawn into this conversation and Erin's life, there's a tribute to her mom on there. There's some really neat stuff, and I won't say about the music and the school that was started. So we'll catch up with that in a moment. But let's talk about, do you want to talk about I'm just going to call them husband number 1 and husband number 2. I don't want to give them enough credit, for having value. So do you want to cover husband number 1 first, or should we go right into husband number 2? I think that's...
We don't need to spend a lot of time on husband number 1, but you know what? I almost called them that in the book. One of the things, anybody out there going to write a memoir, make sure you have a disclaimer and you change all
the names.
And and any identifying characteristics and anything else you can without affecting your story. So both my husbands have different names, but we lived on a different street. He had a different job. I even changed the name of the dog, because, it's just like, I didn't want anybody to lead the story to a particular person, because that's not what the story is about. The story is about trying to recognize signs, of covert narcissism early in a relationship as quickly as possible, to do that. Anyway, back to your question.
Well, actually, yes, we're going to go into husband number 2. But one thing that first. I hope you didn't change the name to shield the guilty, and that is the town that or the area that you moved to in New Jersey with husband number 2 was called Mount Misery. Please tell me. I looked it up on Google. Was it really Mount Misery? Because that is so ironically fitting. So ironically fitting. And I don't mean to correct you, but I will. It's actually in Pennsylvania, so it's near Valley. I'm sorry. No, it's totally I'm a Florida boy, so I don't know my Pennsylvania too good. You're a Florida boy. Yeah, Florida man. Born and raised in Florida. No, I'm a DC guy originally. So that's what I thought. But I'm clueless. We would go to Cape May in the summer, and that's all I know about Jersey. So anyway, please, yes, correct me. So you're in Pennsylvania. All right. So that is true. The name, okay, so we lived in a house, and we lived there, my second husband and I, for 16 years. We lived in this home, and it was a development that was built in about maybe the late 50s, early 60s. Okay. And it was, I guess it was a combination of colonial homes and modern structures. So, contemporary homes, and all on 2.5 acres. So it was an old development up on this little hill outside of Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. And they called it, I'm going to say the name because everybody can figure it out. This is not a big problem. They called it Valley Forge Mountain. Okay. Right. But the real name on a map, you go look it up, is Mount Misery. I did. And it is adjacent to Mount Joy. So there's Mount Joy and Mount Misery. Mount Joy is within Valley Forge Park, and Mount Misery is just outside of Valley Forge Park, the actual National Historical Park. The reason it's called Mount Misery is because many of George Washington's soldiers died there, right? Okay. So they call that there weren't a lot of, there wasn't a lot of protection there for them. So they died in the winter there. So that's why they call that Mount Misery, because that's where most of the soldiers died. And that's where they decided to, make this development. And this is where we ended up living, on Mount Misery, right? So fitting. I'm telling you, it could be a Stephen King novel. It totally could. Yeah, it sounds like the name of a novel, Mount Misery, my life with 20 years with a narcissist. So maybe what we could do to get a little more in depth and drill down on the matter that would benefit others is, let's talk about the process of what a narcissist does in terms of love bombing, the Jekyll and Hyde. Your second husband really was sort of textbook covert narcissist. So if you could share that with us, I think that would be important. Right. I want to start just for a second with the first husband, just so there's a little context. Yes. My first husband I married when I was 31 years old. So you would think I'd be old enough to know better. But remember, I didn't know better from my childhood. And then I had a big distraction through my 20s. So I thought I was chronologically old enough to know better. But emotionally, I was not even close. Okay. So once again, instead of marrying the age of my father, I married the alcoholism of my father. So my first husband was alcoholic, and he also hid that from me very well while we were dating. Got married very quickly, only 5 months. But I have a son, 31-year-old son from that marriage, and he's a blessing and a deep thinker and emotional young man, and I adore him. So I'm super grateful for that. His father is not a narcissist. However, he also comes from a lot of childhood dysfunction, and he's extremely bright. So he can use all of those narcissistic tricks. He's got them in his back pocket. If he wants to blame shift you and turn it back on you, it'll happen lightning fast because he's a genius. He'll triangulate, all those things. So he knows how to use the narcissistic tricks, but I would not call him, somebody that is in a disordered way, narcissistic. Okay. Narcissism is it's so much like the way they describe autism. It exists on a spectrum, right? So everyone possesses some degree of narcissism. You and I both do. You wouldn't be able to stand there talking to me without some degree of
confidence in your
Yeah.
ability to communicate, right?
It's the
So there's
egoic end of narcissism. It's just that operating system.
Yes, absolutely. You
Yeah.
have to have some degree just to operate in the world, and there is healthy narcissism. That's
Yeah.
called self-esteem,
Mhm.
right? So, and then there is, like I said, on a continuum, kind of on a spectrum, there are different levels and different styles that people adopt. And then you get to some point where, you know, they would call that a disordered level, you know, of narcissism. And that can be very, very, very dangerous. So let's move on to the second husband.
Yeah.
The second husband, all right, so I'm married 6 years to the first husband, divorced because mostly of the alcoholism. You know, it's easy to see alcoholism. You look at alcohol, you're drunk guy, and you're like, that's a problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot harder to detect when someone is trying to game you emotionally, right? That's very subtle.
Yeah.
So the first marriage was easier to pull myself out of and say, all right, you know, this is not working. I have to get out of here. I spent the next 3 years having a great old time being single, and then I met my second husband. Well, he was completely different than anyone I'd ever met in my entire life. Not just anybody I'd ever dated. Very different than anyone I'd ever dated, but completely different than anyone I'd ever met that I could remember meeting before.
Mm-hmm.
And that intrigued me, you know, became a bit of a mystery. Like I had to find something out, you know, about this guy. What is he hiding? It was interesting because he was sort of tight-lipped, you know, that in itself should have been a red flag, right? For a normal person, that's a red flag. All right, so I'll tell you when I first met him. I met him on Match.com. I wasn't even looking to date. I was actually trying to support a friend of mine who was getting on this online dating thing that just started, kind of just launched. It's like 25 years ago, 24 years ago. I said, oh, I'll help you out and we'll both do it at the same time. It'll be fun. And I met this guy. So we had our first date. We went out for sushi, and it's kind of a weird scene at lunch. So I order my sushi, all my favorite stuff, and he's looking at the menu for like 10 minutes. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And he says, I'll have 3 orders of fatty tuna. And I thought, okay, so after 10 minutes, you come up with just one item, like a side thing. Weird. Okay. So that's the first thing that I thought, doesn't feel right. Something didn't feel right in my gut about that. Like, why would it take 10 minutes? And because in reality, here's what's really going on. He'd never been to a sushi restaurant. He'd never eaten sushi. He didn't know what to order, and he didn't want to look uncool. He wanted to make sure he could make a good impression on me. Right. So, but it didn't feel right. Something felt wrong. All right. So, and that continued throughout the course of the lunch. So he's hanging on my every word. He's listening to everything I'm saying. At the end of lunch, I look down. He hasn't even taken one bite of his sushi. And I say, aren't you going to eat your lunch? And he says, oh, I had a big breakfast. Weird gut feeling number 2. If you had a big breakfast, why'd you order anything? Yeah. And if you're coming out to lunch on a date with me, why'd you have a big breakfast?
Yeah.
Right? Weird. Right? But instead, I enjoyed the attention he was giving me so much. I've shoved that stuff aside. Don't bother with that, Erin. Focus on the thing that makes you feel good, which is he's listening to you.
Yeah.
Right? So that's what they do. It's called mirroring. Narcissists, pay attention. This is really where they get you. This is where they start. If they agree with everything you say, like, oh, that's my favorite movie. Oh, I used to be a lifeguard. Oh, that's my favorite band. I love sushi too. Like, whatever, you know, those kinds of things. Just be wary of stuff like that. People are different, you know, they don't have everything in common with you. If they start telling you you're their soulmate and they've never met anybody like you, just put a pause button on. So that's what I had going on, is he's hanging on my every word and I'm loving the attention. So then we went over to where I worked to show him. I was working in a theater at the time. I wanted to show him the guts of the theater, the backstage, the lighting rig and whatever. And as I was there showing him around, somebody that reported to me at the theater came out freaking out, an emergency, like, I need your help. The ticketing system is down and and I'm focused on her and trying to help her. Turn around and look, the date is gone. He's gone. He didn't tap me on the shoulder, didn't say, excuse me, you seem busy. Okay, weird gut feeling number 3, right? I pushed that one away too. Right? So I like the attention. So I thought to myself, maybe he didn't like me. That's why he ran off like that. Maybe I was reading the situation wrong. It really seemed like he was interested in me, but I guess not. And then I got home and there was a message from him. And I was even happier because I thought, oh, so I was wrong. I'm so glad I was wrong. And he does like me. And he does want to see me again. Right. So that's, that's what we call cognitive dissonance, when you override your gut instincts. And so I'm here to just say repeatedly, if I can't say it enough, learn to tune into your feelings. Everybody has an internal compass. Everybody has an internal radar system that's built for you personally, right? It's in there from, I don't know where it came from, but everybody has their own. What's right for you? And if you can learn to pay attention to that, slow yourself down a little bit, that's how you're going to be able to check in with yourself. So very important to check in with yourself. And that's something I was not capable of doing. I would use my brain to overpower my emotions so that I could proceed forward in the way that I wanted to. And what I wanted was to have this guy that was interested in what I had to say, who was kind of handsome, who was very thoughtful and a good listener and had a good job and showed up on time and seemed like he was on paper, terrific boyfriend. Only one marriage, only one child, nice family, blah, blah, blah. Also from DC.
Yeah. I remember that in the book. Yeah.
Also from DC.
Yeah. Hell of a town.
Hell of a town, right?
Hell of a
They make all kinds. It really is. They make all kinds down there in DC.
Yeah.
It is quite the melting pot.
My mother, and so I'll confess, I had a dark, vulnerable triad, covert narcissist mother, and she used to say, I read that the Antichrist was born in Maryland, where you were born. She used to try to do stuff like that.
I think I married him.
Yeah, probably.
She was right.
She was, but she was like,
your mother call me.
Yeah, she would infer, and I was excited. I was like, I could possibly be the Antichrist. What a valuable role to play in the world. Instead of trying to play psyops with me, I was like, this would be the greatest thing ever. I mean, what do you get as an Antichrist? So, of course, I was 18.
I think you get to be in charge of everything as the Antichrist.
You just get to be the spoiler, right?
Right?
Yeah. No offense, Jesus.
That's some crazy stuff. That is some crazy stuff, dude. That is crazy.
She said that seriously to me one time. She goes, I read that the Antichrist was born in Maryland around the time that you were, and I just can't help but wonder sometimes. That's probably typical mother and son bantering, because like I could say things too, but so anyway, just an aside.
Too funny. That's too funny.
So husband number two is from DC. We got that established.
All right. So once I'm being mirrored and I feel seen and I feel like I have a lot in common with this guy, and he's paying a lot of attention, he's clearly focused on me because perhaps there are some things that I divulged in my conversation at lunch where I was being tested. You're also being kind of evaluated for your malleability. What do you have to contribute to the narcissist? Remember, they're thinking transactionally and they're not thinking the same way that other people think. So starts with the mirroring. And once they have a receptive target, then the love bombing starts. So for me, it was flowers every date. He would work. I want to say he had at least a 3-hour drive to and from work, hour and a half each way. He'd still make time for me every night, bring flowers. One time he shows up with a Tiffany bracelet, had to cost hundreds of dollars for nothing. Like, here's a bracelet. It's not my birthday. It's not Valentine's Day. It's just nothing. Next thing I know, we're going to Maui and I'm just thinking, this is like, what an adventure. What a great relationship. He's the best, thoughtful, helpful. He doesn't talk too much. And that's a little bit weird to me, but maybe since he's so different and I'm so talkative, maybe that'll work out better. Maybe that's why, my other past relationships haven't worked out before. Maybe I need more of a supportive person, like person in a supportive role. I would say anything to myself to keep it going, right? To keep it going. So the love bombing keeps going on, the flowers and the, showing up on time and helping me. My roof blew off my house and he got up there and fixed it himself, fixed every broken thing in my house, just everything, mow the lawn, everything. I'm thinking, God, what a great guy. This is husband material. Not the party guy. This is a solid man. This is husband material. So I thought maybe I just don't know how to pick a husband. My mother didn't do it right. I haven't done it right. So let me just try this guy because he's totally different. But what was really missing is I didn't have that emotional connection to him. And the reason why I didn't have it is because he wasn't divulging any information about himself. He wasn't showing any intimacy or vulnerability to me. And that's another thing to look out for. They are not divulging information about themselves because they are collecting ammunition. You just can't tell. It's sort of disguised as interest, right? So they'll continue that love bombing. And for me, it was about 1.5 years before we moved in together. So he convinced me to sell my home that I owned outright. And I got the proceeds from that home and I put the money down on a house that we could move into together because I wanted a family. I didn't have a family growing up. I had 4 people living in the house in different directions and I always wanted a family. And he was the daddy and I'm the mommy and he's got a daughter and I've got a son and we've got a dog and a cat, and it's like, what could be more perfect? It's like the idyllic dream I've been waiting for my whole life. Guy's got a good job and he mows the lawn and blows the snow and does everything. He helps, he's handy and, smart and makes good money and good listener, right? It all sounds like the perfect thing, but I'm still not feeling him, really. I mean, I'm moving in with this guy, but I'm still not quite feeling this emotional connection. And I then tell myself again, it'll come over time. People tell you don't always falling in love at, head over heels at first sight is probably not, something you can trust. Trust and love is built over time. So I allowed that to just, build itself over time. Well, it never did. I have the same person who is, feeling very distant from me and is not divulging any information and facts about themselves to me, but they're still helpful. So those things are just having a big old argument in my head. Well, he did this, but then you don't feel that. And then he said this weird thing. And then once we moved in together, my house was gone and he had everything he needed. He had my money down. He had me in the house. He had all the furniture. Everything's all set up. That's when the devaluation process or, that stage of a dysfunctional or a narcissistic relationship starts. And suddenly they've got you and they realize you're not perfect and you don't fix all their problems and you don't want to, cater to their every need. Sometimes you may have needs of your own. You may even have a criticism. Like I said to him one time, honey, can you close the door behind you? Right? How dare I? Right? So that's when they start to devalue you because they see you as imperfect, suddenly they maybe made a mistake. They thought that you were going to save them from their misery. They project all their internal misery onto you. They usually pick very successful, happy people that have a lot going on with friends and family and confidence because they don't have that. They want to just partner up with you so they can take that away from you. And when they see that, you also have other needs and you're a human being and sometimes you are flawed or make mistakes or criticize them or don't meet their needs. Well, then they're going to punish you for it. And I mean, punish. You don't even know you're being punished. Trust me, you're being punished the whole time. You're being punished. And that would be in the form of stonewalling, right? That would be something my husband used a lot with stonewalling. I would ask him a question and he wouldn't answer me. And then he might answer a little while later, 30 seconds later. What? And boy, that'll train a person to just get smaller and smaller until you disappear. And they call that walking on eggshells. So they're training you really to just be there for them to project their internal misery and unhappiness onto. And a person who has got codependent tendencies and traits, a person who has not got a good connection to their instincts, because they've grown up in a dangerous fight flight kind of survival situation, can easily get way deep into a relationship with a person like this and just become more and more confused over time. So I would hear little nuggets of arrogance coming out of my husband. He would say things like, you probably love this from the book. It's tough being in the top 2%, surrounded by the lower 98. Right?
Wah, wah, wah.
Wow. I used to think that was sort of a statement on today's political climate or, maybe the people saying the dumbing of America or whatever, those kinds of things. I didn't realize that he really meant that literally, that he
Mm.
didn't really have time for any more than about 2% of the population. The other 90%, 98% are in his way.
Mm-hmm.
And
Beneath
so,
him.
I would tell myself it's a joke. He's kidding, because nobody really believes that, do they? Well,
Yeah,
guess what?
he did.
I'm wrong all around. So,
Yeah.
so it just got worse and worse to the point of, so many terrible things happened. I had so many, bad luck incidences, so many things that happened. I tell a story in the book of, should I tell the story of him running over the guy in the car? So is that a
Yeah,
good story for now? We'll tell that story.
yeah,
So here I am
that's
married to
that's
this guy.
intriguing, I think.
He goes down to DC to visit his daughter. I mean, we're together at this point, maybe almost say 8 or 9 years at this point. Goes down to DC to visit his daughter, and at midnight he's coming home and he's driving up the highway, and I get a phone call and he says, listen, I'm going to be a little bit late today. I'm going to be a little late tonight. And I said, oh, what's going on? Everything okay? And he goes, well, there's been an accident. So just the way he phrased it, there's been an accident, made me think that it is not involving him, meaning it might be ahead of him and he's stuck in traffic,
He's a
right?
witness, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, because he's sort of disconnected from it. There's been an accident.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like I was in an accident.
Right.
I said, oh my God, what happened? Are you okay? Everything okay? And he's like, yeah, I'm fine. And I said, oh, okay. So did, somebody like try to cross over lanes? I'm trying to get some information. I'm pulling teeth and I'm not getting anything. And he goes, oh, no, I was in the accident. And I'm like, oh my God, are you okay? He goes, yeah, I'm fine. I go, well, how's the other guy? He goes, he's dead. Just like that.
Cold.
He's dead.
Yeah.
And then he goes, listen, I got to run. The cops are here. All right. I'll see you in a while. Click. Well, there's no going to sleep for me after that.
Yeah.
I'm like, if all I can do is I can emotionally, empathize with any person that would have that kind of an experience, I would blame myself. I would think to myself, I should have been driving slower. What if I had been in a different lane? Had I left an hour before, I should have done driving in the daytime. I would have just,
Right.
I would have been so remorseful. I would not have been able to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, he gets home and he doesn't want to talk about it. He's like, listen, I'm tired. He's going to go to bed. Right. And then he never ever wanted to talk about it again. So a week later, my mom was visiting and she asked him, because my mom was a psychologist, she was a model when I was young, but then she got a psych degree and became a shrink. Whole nother sidebar to that crazy, but
that's like Mount Misery. It's just so perfect for this book. Yeah.
Right, isn't it though? Yeah. My mother, the narcissistic psychologist.
Yeah.
Anyway, she said to him, I call him Fabio in the book. Fabio, are you okay? Since last week, since
killed someone. Yeah.
Since you killed a person.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, like, what do you mean? And she's like, well, since the accident. He's like, that guy got in my way. He got to what he deserved. That's what you get for being on the road on a bike at night. Like, what an idiot, what a moron. I walked out of the room. And I was stunned, and my mom was stunned too, but she did me a big disservice that day, because she said to me, you probably just can't process the trauma. Because when you do have a really serious trauma in life, your brain will protect you. Your brain's there to
dissociate.
Yeah. So I wanted to believe that my husband was not a monster, that he did. Boy, was I wrong. So I continued on with that, continuing with my very strong cognitive dissonance skills. But many things like that happened. There were so many terrible incidences and things that happened. But I think our biggest problem was his triangulation of his daughter and I against each other. That was a big game for him. He would tell me, she doesn't like you. He would tell her she doesn't like you. So we'd be afraid of each other. That way he could control the narrative. And it was very stressful for both of us. And we both agreed as adults, or when she became an adult, that had he not done it the way he had done it, we could have been great friends. She's an extraordinary young woman. And she's so strong in her soul, that little girl. I mean, she's in her mid-30s now. I'll still call her a little girl.
Yeah.
But she was raised by, this person, and she was also treated similarly in different ways.
Yeah.
And she found a way out of it. She really did. She found a way out of it. She's still probably processing some of it. But definitely she's a super smart cookie. But when we were first moved in together and she was a child, I just wanted her to be my little stepdaughter. I wanted to take her
Right.
to the Nutcracker,
Right.
and I wanted her to be a part of my family. That's why I wanted her. I wanted my family,
Yeah. Yeah.
So he made that impossible to happen. And that's another thing. Just, the relationship was just a nightmare the whole time. And I just kept trying to fix it. Fix. I'm going to fix it. Couldn't fix my childhood family. I'm going to fix this one. Yeah. Wrong. Fix you, right? That's how you do it.
Yeah.
Fix the person. Fix
Yeah.
the you.
Because that gets your radar up and running, and then you get the bullshit detector, you get the love bomb detector. All those things come online
right.
when you're invested in yourself and not projecting in the other way as a codependent. Yeah.
That's right.
Get the book.
Get a book. Or,
Yeah.
I tell people, write a book. Everybody should write a book.
Mm.
And not everybody should release their book, but boy, you're going to learn things about yourself if you write a book.
It's
and what I learned is the connection back to my mom was stronger than I realized. It was very easy for me to point the fingers at my father, alcoholic, depressive. Externally, you can see it, right? He's drunk. He's not talking. He doesn't get out of a chair. He doesn't even get dressed. He doesn't comb his hair. Depression, that's a problem. Mom looks fine. She's got false eyelashes and a wig and a great outfit, and she's got friends, and seems like everything's fine there. So I would always put the blame and point the finger at my father for my difficulties with my adult relationships, my love relationships. Writing the book allowed me to connect the dots to my mom, and realizing much more so, it was a bigger impact to be stonewalled by my mom, not cared for or seen and heard by my mom. That's what allowed me to tolerate that behavior as an adult. And so writing the book gave me that connection that I needed to learn about myself, to learn to do what you just said. Protect yourself so your radar goes up and you start to recognize love bombing or people that are thinking transactionally or predatory towards others. And I can spot them a mile away now, It's like they have a big old sign on them now. I'm a narcissist. Stay away.
Yeah.
And I even realized that I had some friends that were narcissistic, and I had to, it's another sad thing when you come to the realization that you've been victimized by a narcissist and you have to kind of unpack all of that stuff and reprocess it again. You come to the realization that maybe you've allowed other people like that in your life. And stepping back, you mentioned this very briefly, but working in the music business, same thing. A lot of narcissists. They wouldn't allow 2 female DJs to go back to back. No 2 female artists played on the radio back to back. Why? No problem playing a bunch of male artists back to back, right? Right. So, but you just learn to accept that, I knew that I had a great job and I didn't want to lose it. So I'm going to have to accept that. And that's the way of the world. I know that women have been trying to speak up for equal rights for 50 or more years. And I know we're coming along, yay, us women, we're coming along. But it's still an issue, still an issue, right?
Yeah.
Still an issue. There's a lot of men in the world that like their power, and they're going to find a way to keep it, however that is. So, but things are changing, thankfully.
I think so. And, I work with a social theory that if women can get stronger and pick better partners, and that's a very loaded pick, like better and pick and things like that. But the spirit is that if you are an empowered woman, and as you are now wise to chicanery and bullshit and things like that, and the manipulation and the horror that can occur, that the children born, because you mentioned this in your book about generational trauma and things like that. And that's one thing that I'm highly supportive of, anybody that's doing that kind of work, to capture that and get with the 9 to 14-year-old, not just girls, but boys too, and say, listen, honey, you are whole, you are complete. This is what a healthy relationship looks like. This is what a healthy, balanced male is. They can still be masculine, and they can still be a strong man, but they, look for these signs, look for the warning signs of these. And because ultimately behind every tyrannical man is fragility. And I say that as a man, that the men, whether it's Xi Jinping or Vladimir Putin or some asshole down the street that's, beating his wife, they're all very fragile, wounded men, boys, whatever you want to call it. And so if we can have that big conversation intergenerationally and talk to younger women and boys and say, don't you dare manipulate a woman. Don't you dare treat her like an object or a transactional commodity or something like that. I think that would only help the next few generations that are coming online. So there's my soapbox moment. But that's
I'm with you.
Yeah, that's how I
I'm
feel like we can heal this process. It's a
absolutely
cyclical process. Yeah.
not only in the choosing, but what you just mentioned, in the parenting, in the
Mhm.
communicating to your children, and that is where, there are some theories about how narcissism, comes to be, how somebody becomes narcissistic.
Mhm.
And, there's no way to prove it. There's no blood test, there's no definitive
Yeah.
brain scan, and there are many therapists out there that, they rail against the diagnosis manual because they go, well, how can you diagnose somebody based on a set of behaviors? It just seems like people's behaviors are all different. Well, can I tell you something? If you've been victimized by a narcissist, no, they're not. They're all exactly the same when it comes to a narcissist.
Mhm.
And yes, they're all very fear-based, and that fear causes them to, want to control their environment so they can, keep from being re-injured or whatever it is that is their problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yes, absolutely.
No, I
Very
agree.
I said for somebody like myself and maybe a lot of your listeners as well, if you're a very empathetic person, you feel that fear, you
Yeah.
feel that vulnerability way beneath them, and you want to help them to feel secure and whatnot.
Mhm.
But they are there. It's not possible. I think of a narcissist, a clinically diagnosed narcissist, as like the boy in the bubble. They got a
Mhm.
hard bubble around them. Their own little world of reality is surrounding them in there, and this is just keep telling me that I'm awesome and the world works the way I want it to work and all that stuff. God forbid anybody try to shove your hand through that bubble, right? You're going to get bit. You're going to get it chopped off because they have a reality that allows them to feel safe and in control.
Mhm.
Because yes, you're right. They feel so incredibly unsafe, fearful, and different than others. They know that they feel differently and they think differently than others. And there's so much shame around that.
Mhm.
But yeah, be wary because they can't change. Is almost impossible. It's interesting, though. I will just mention that if you're interested in this topic, there are some self-actualized and self-aware narcissists on YouTube,
Mhm.
and they actually talk about how they think. So you could learn a little bit about how they think from them.
That's cool. Yeah. It's like pro-social psychopathy. You can talk to people who are high function or functional psychopaths, and they're connected enough to know that, I may derive pleasure from torturing somebody, but I mean, that's in there, it's inherent, but they're switched on socially and they know where the boundaries are, the normatives for social behavior. And so you can learn from those two. There's one guy's a little overrated. I think he makes too much of it, but there's nuance in everything, right? There's like sociopathy and narcissism. Oh, there's your baby.
My dog is acting up, so I had to bring him in.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, no, I love. My cat's around here somewhere too. He's right behind me. So
this is Murphy. This is my boyfriend now, and I'm just telling you that this guy is who walked me out of a narcissistic relationship, right by my side, and loved me unconditionally, and really helped me to heal a lot.
Oh yeah.
And then my other healing tool is this here. This is my. Can you see this? Is my other
yeah.
my voodoo doll. I sell these on my website, so if you need one.
So what's the song? You have 3 versions. You have 3 videos for a song on your YouTube channel. So do you even want to talk about that, or should we do that off the record? Your bunny song. We don't have to bring it up. We could talk one-on-one, but I was curious about that.
All right. I'd say stop recording. Stop recording for a second.
Well, we'll no.
Well, no, because I have to leave in 15 minutes, but I can tell you that story in a minute. It's not worth it. The guy that at the end, when I talk about how I met somebody online that made me feel magic. All right. So I wrote that for him.
Okay. All right.
That's all. Curious. It's sort of a side thing. I just wrote a song and did a video.
Song. I like it. It's kind of catchy. Yeah, it's cute.
I stepped on a bunny.
Yeah,
so
sorry,
honey.
Yeah.
Oh, it ain't that funny. Only money for your money. Yeah, I don't know if it's relative to the, it's relative to the discussion.
Yeah. Anyway, I just had
15 minutes, and then I have to literally run at 2:45.
Yeah. Well, we can wrap this up because I don't want to spoil the end of the book, and because you're planning.
Well, we can talk about how it's happy. I think it's important to talk about. People are afraid to read my book and can't finish it sometimes because it's too raw.
There
are some people.
It's hard in places.
Too raw.
Mm-hmm. No.
Well, think about
Well,
people have been through this type of a relationship, and some of my friends have found it, very painful and had to stop, relatives of mine. But everybody who gets to the end loves the end, because the end is, are we talking on camera? Or can we
we're
talk
still
about this?
recording. No, I didn't hit
Good.
pause. Yeah.
Okay. The end of my book is there's like the self-realization, the self-actualization, the self-love comes in, the awareness comes in, the preparedness for life and moving forward comes into it. There's a lot of I feel like the ending of my book is so easily attainable for everyone. Right? I didn't run off into, the sunset with another relationship with Mr. Perfect Wonderful on a white horse.
Like every rom-com ever done.
Right. You know what? My ending is that I really did finally, instead of finding myself in California, I really came to find who I am, what makes me tick, and who do I want to be going forward? How can I protect myself, and how can I help other people, to protect themselves as well too. So that's why my book has such an uplifting ending, because there really is a lot of, happy healing, at the end of this, if you can take the time to do the work. There's a lot to do. And like you had mentioned, Dr. Romani, and my other favorite was a girl named Lisa A. Romano. That girl cracks me up. She would say, here's my favorite story of hers. She said, recognizing a covert relationship is near impossible, because they use intermittent reinforcement to be kind and good to you before they punish and are hurtful and deceptive or whatever other things they're doing. So here's her story. She says, being in a covert relationship is like, or a relationship with a covert narcissist is like being a chicken caught up in a tornado. Right? You're like spinning all around and you're like, what's going on? Up from down till you are suddenly flung like a mile away. You turn back and you look and go, oh my God, that was a big tornado.
Yeah.
And it really is. It's like you become so hyper vigilant at staying alive, in situations. It really is like the frog in the boiling water, or being a spider trapped in a web. It's almost like that narcissist is a spider. They inject you with the poison, and that poison takes away your lifeblood, your life energy, your soul. They're sucking it out of you, and you just think it's not even possible, but it really is. They are like energy vampires. They zap your being away from you. Yeah. And once you get out of it, if you're able to get out of it, if you're able to leave, or if you're lucky enough to be like me, to be discarded because I'm too stubborn, I would have never left him. Yeah. So thankfully he left me. Well, the recovery is really glorious, and it's been 4 years for me to get to the point where I can read and I can sleep. And I want to say that neuroplasticity is real. So you can repair your brain. Just, you have to get out from under, like I said, you have to stop the bleeding, or you have to learn to avoid it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, I can't say enough about your book as far as being that kind of good example of the whole system, the whole process. You even had 2 different types of narcissists involved, which is good. And like you said, the outcome, it was a hard read in some places. I told you before we hit record, I didn't go to sleep so easily last night, mostly because I am Machiavellian thanks to my covert narcissist, so I can fantasize about things that shall never be spoken to others, but just these sick things that I would have done to somebody who did that to me. But you came away with the right perspective, I think. So to go Buddhist for a minute, there's the right path, and you took the right path. You even dedicated this book to husband number 2, and that shows, I think, that you learned what was necessary. It cost you, but you learned. And so great, that's the final transaction, is you had to pay that price, but you got your life, your dignity, your identity, your personhood, all your agency, everything came back, and now you're processing that. And I think that's my takeaway from the book, is that you are whole now, and that you have the right to be whole for the remainder of your days. And that's the greatest gift anyone can get. We can lose, and you even say this in your book, material stuff. Okay. And without spoiling the book, there's a good happy ending for material things, I think. And I won't bring it up, but I just think you'll see that in the book. And so, yeah, I think you came away from this as well as anybody could. I think that's I think that's a good for me.
I'm fortunate in many,
Yeah.
many ways. You know, I started out, I was already, like I said, I have a little fire in me. I'm already a pretty motivated and strong person. I'm a smart person. I did have resources. I have friends, you know, and I have friends in my community and whatnot that I could rely on. And in ways, I've made very good use of my pandemic time because I wrote this book in 4 months. It came out of me like an exorcism, speaking of Linda, right?
Yeah.
It came out of me like an exorcism. So yeah, there are some people who do not have the good fortune that I had. There are people who have chronic illness. There are people who have no ability to work. Maybe they've been, you know, in a narcissistic relationship for 35 or 40 years. Some people don't have the good health or any support system to go to. And they have to learn other skills. And they're out there. There are skills like, just look up the term gray rocking, you know, where really a narcissist is looking to get a rise out of you because if they can control your behavior, get you worked up, riled up, they feel powerful when they do that, you know, and so you'll find yourself riled up all the time. But yes, so I am fortunate in the fact that I started out with, I had a lot going on for myself in ways, the fact that I was 40, you know, when I first met a narcissist. Real quickly, I will tell you, just I want to put a cap on this and tell you that at the end of the book, I talk about an ayahuasca ceremony that I attended just out of curiosity. But I want to tell you not just so much about my ayahuasca experience, because it was helpful, but it wasn't profound per se.
Yeah.
But while I was in the ceremony, I'm there in the middle of 4 o'clock in the morning or something, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I hear this girl wailing. I mean, she is on the medicine and she is wailing like I've never heard anybody. And my heart went out to her. All I could think of is, what did they do to you? Like, what did they do to you?
Right.
Well, I found out the next day what happened to her. She was snatched up by a narcissist when she was only 20 years old, right? And this was her college professor.
Oh, God.
Right. So he's like the dean of a college and she's a student. So same kind of dynamic. He's so smart and revered all throughout the community. He's not as covert as he is, a little more overt, but either way, charmed her. She had 2 babies, spent almost 20 years of her life with him. But so he snatched her up at 20. He stole her whole life. So at 40, she finally got out of there. But that wailing was, you know, for her whole life, you know. I was fortunate in that I had that period of time from age, say, 19 to 40 to actually create some strength. You know, even if it was strength, self-perceived strength that I had from my survival skills, right?
Yeah.
So I do know there are many, many people out there that don't have the internal strength or the fire or whatnot, and this can take you right down to the ground, being in a relationship with somebody like this. So I hope these people will get my book or refer my book to other people, because I do hear from, I have 88 5-star reviews in like 3 months on the book. And I hear from people telling me all the time, you know, you've written a really important book, like a statement on sociology, sociological discourse, or, you know, almost like a manual. It's a personal story. So you understand the context of how this looks in a real, you know, in a real life scenario. But I need it to be more like an educational type of a manual so we can all learn to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
So it is many things, or I try to make it many things. I'm glad that you understood the way I was trying to use the book to help others through my story.
Yeah.
You know, because I think if you just read like textbook stories or case studies, you may not relate quite as well. You know, you really have to understand a person's entire life and their entire young life dynamic to understand how it happens and who might be at risk. You know, we have all these screenings for your at-risk breast cancer survivor or whatnot, but there's no screenings for, are you potentially somebody who could be victimized by a predatory person?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So you have to do that work yourself.
I said to my wife this morning, in my mentally preparing myself for this conversation, I said, you know, the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts have their merit badges. They got to revise that for the 21st century. And I think Girl Scouts can get their identify a narc badge, or, you know,
I love it.
Yeah. And it's for boys and girls. Either way, it doesn't matter. And everybody in between.
I'm writing this idea down because I think there's
I think it's, yeah, I'm dead serious. Yeah, I mean, it's a little gallows humor, but I think it's dead.
Right.
These are life lessons. In the 1950s, you did tote and chip, and you learned how to, shoot an arrow, and that's great. But and of course, there was a lot of
Basket weaving.
basket weaving,
Basket weaving.
all that stuff,
Yeah.
right? So now, yeah, I think, and especially in the digital age, it's like how to be street smart and how to be, human smart and know what's out there. Know your predator. Know your
That's
predator.
right.
So,
And just know that they exist, just know that they exist and they walk amongst us and they're entitled to all hang out with each other, but they need to stay away from us.
Yeah, no
because they can
judgment,
be
just
very, very damaging.
yeah, no judgment. Just don't, I don't want, no thanks. But Erin, you wrote a wonderful book. Yeah, I love your little doll. That's
Back
great.
off.
Yes, exactly. I have my stripes. A Dark Force, 20 Years with a Covert Narcissist is a great book. I don't say that lightly because I would never have a guest on if I read a book and I thought, I would be honest. And I'd be like, I can't get behind this book. But having been raised by whatever that person was, I don't know how to identify it, but it was in this domain. I can resonate with it, and I, like you, and this is part of why I do this interview series, is for helping people to become whole, helping people to make sense and find other meanings that are healthy for themselves. So this fits really well, and I appreciate you being on as a guest, and I appreciate our conversation. And I always like to think that our conversation is going to have a life of its own. There will be discovery, and I pray that people find this and help themselves at whatever stage they're in with their relating with narcissists, that this has some value, and that your book will have that value as well, which I know it will. So Erin, I very much appreciate this conversation. I appreciate meeting your dog.
I want to say that just to your listeners, you can find me online. I'm everywhere. So I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook. I have a website, A Dark Force. So it's adarkforce.com. And where I sell the books, so you can get an autographed copy of the book on my website. You can also buy a voodoo doll on my website. But the book is also available on Amazon and barnesandnoble.com and at bookstores everywhere and whatnot. So just getting started with the book. It's been out about 4 months or so. And I thank you for the opportunity to talk about narcissism, because, awareness is key. Education, and just to shine a light on this style of covert narcissism, and to understand that these people think the same way that the overt or, grandiose narcissist thinks, and can be just as dangerous. They're just a lot harder to spot. And they're so very covert, that you could be years and years and years, decades into a relationship with somebody before you realize what's going on. And a lot of damage can be done. In closing, there's something in the book where my son, who I talked about earlier, he said, he didn't just steal everything you ever owned, Mom. He stole your entire life. Right? Well, no, he didn't. But that's what it felt like to my son, because he didn't just steal possessions. He stole our belief in humanity. He stole our trust for our people we've chosen to be in our lives. How could we have made such a poor decision? And so it is really hard to process all that. And I hope I'm, helping my son process that as well, because there's a ripple effect to being with a narcissist. It doesn't just affect that partnership. That may be all that you see, it's happening behind closed doors, but that impacts in waves around it. So let's stop it in its tracks, right? No more narcs.
Yeah. Amen. I'm all for that. So again, thank you. And
thank you.
And to the YouTube audience, thank you guys so very much. I hope this was a good, important, meaningful conversation. The double wave. I'm always grateful for that little bit that hangs on at the end. It's usually, I always joke, it's always about 10% in my analytics. And man, bless you guys. You guys are rock and roll. So I'll say goodbye to you, Erin, after we stop the record. And again, YouTube, thank you guys so much. We'll see you on the next conversation. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.